What have been the drivers? There's no single factor, but I'd say among the most important has been the fact that at the same time as real take-home pay has flatlined, so too has the measured productive capacity of the economy. Typically you expect that as that productive capacity builds up and grows over time, that gets mirrored in pay increases. So if we're looking for one of, if not the biggest contributing cause, it is the accompanying flatlining of not just the UK's, but many other economies' productive capacity over the last 10 years or so.
And that has been extraordinary, because we tend to think we just get a little bit better at everything. People will ask, what is going on there? Have we run out of innovation?
This is not a story about stagnating innovation in the main. So when we talk about, I don't know, the rise of the robots, the fourth industrial revolution, it's there, but only for a subset of firms, only for that 1% or perhaps 5% of firms who are taking the productivity high road. The root cause of the stagnation in productivity and in pay is that long, lower tail of firms. They're taking the low productivity road.
It's like 95% of them.
It's a sizable chunk. Right. It's at least 3/4 and perhaps more.
And what they're doing is they're just employing more cheap labour, squeezing the labour very hard, but not really equipping it in the best ways, or innovating, or thinking of new things to be doing and new products to sell. Correct? So
quite so. I mean,
and then they can't afford to pay more because they haven't got more revenue, really.
This long tail, and to be clear, this is not just a crisis phenomenon. If you look at those companies, that long tail, they've been with us perhaps for a couple of decades, actually. Every country on the planet appears to have that long tail of firms. It just appears to be somewhat longer in the UK than elsewhere. And there are companies, as you say, that are perhaps not investing sufficiently in the skills of their workers, perhaps not investing sufficiently in machines and automation.
So it's not the champions we need to worry about, it's the kind of mediocre.
I think this is
arithmetically
that would do a lot more. I mean, there's a natural temptation to gravitate towards the new and the shiny. Let's seed the next Tesla or Google or Apple. I am saying to you, arithmetically, in terms of boosting the numbers, you'd probably get a lot more purchase out of incremental improvements from that long tail of companies.
Let's talk about public sector wages. There's a huge debate over public sector pay. It's been going up at 1% a year for the last 5 years or so.
Well, that plainly does factor very significantly in our deliberations when figuring out how great are underlying inflationary pressures in the economy. We have been repeatedly surprised about how weak pay growth has been, not just in the public sector, but in the private sector as well. And if anything, pay growth over the past 12 months has been falling rather than picking up, which has taken us and indeed the rest of the world somewhat by surprise, given that over that same period, jobs growth has remained very buoyant. Unemployment's kept on a falling. So this weighs with us. Of course, it's a factor that has contributed to rates in the UK remaining at their currently very low levels, and watching closely for any signs of pay picking up. That's one of the key indicators we look at when judging the stats.
Right, and just to be clear, that the public sector pay matters in that, it's not just the private sector.
Absolutely.
So, now I know that you don't particularly want to step on the interest rate landmine at this point, but it would be interesting, I think, for people to think about where they might be in 5 or 10 years' time. If people are buying a house or thinking about mortgages, the long-term average on the bank website, it goes back 300 years, it's 5%. So that gives you a guide to the sort of the long-term norm.
Yeah.
What would you advise people to plan on? I mean, to think of rates at the sort of 5% level or the 0.5% level? It's quite a big, it's quite a big span, isn't it?
Well, I mean, you're right in pointing out that rates currently, and if you believe financial markets prospectively, are set to remain pretty low for a pretty long time. I mean, not just the lowest in the last 300 years, possibly the lowest in the last several thousand years, I would say. As and when rates begin to rise in the UK, they are likely to do so in a gradual way and to a limited extent, by which we mean the numbers that may have been in people's heads from the past are probably on the high side relative to what we might expect in the future. Let me not put a number on that.
I won't squeeze you on numbers.
But limited and gradual is the name of the game.
Andrew Haldane, thank you very much.
Thank you, Evan.